Hello and welcome to the Green Hero series. I am Runmai from Celsius and today we are joined by Shri Akhilesh Anil Kumar. Hi Akhilesh, welcome to the Green Hero series. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm good. Thank you so much. So, for our viewers, Mr. Akhilesh Anil Kumar is the founder and director of the Bring Back Green Foundation. He has been a UN India climate youth leader, and he's a prominent voice when it comes to climate advocacy, climate policy, youth advocacy, as well as storytelling. So, welcome to the show, Akhilesh. And my first question to you is that how did you venture into this whole journey of climate activism? How did you get the inspiration to have a foundation of your own? We are curious to know about your journey.
Thank you. And I think I will just give context that I am from Kerala and I started my journey working in the social space, especially around 2018. Did a lot of small things before that, but prominently started working in the social space from 2018 when I turned 18 as well. And just after school, I was working with a nonprofit as a volunteer, and it was not related to climate, but I was already a volunteer trying to understand how the space works, how you talk to different stakeholders, how different things happen. That was the moment when one of the biggest floods happened in Kerala, which was very famous, the 2018 Kerala floods, which was one of the devastating floods that happened in over a century in our state. And one positive outcome I would say that happened from this floods is, one, you could see the resilience of the community, and second is when the state was struggling to find more support, young people came in just enormous numbers, and young people were in the front lines with these government agencies, working with different stakeholders to, as volunteers, just spending their day and night trying to get services to everywhere, get food or supplies to everywhere. It was just crazy to see how much effort young people could put into this. Now the thing was, just after the flood, everybody's direction of thought changed. Like, it was just a disaster, like a one-off disaster. But I was also thinking, where did this come from? What caused this? What exactly is the reason behind this? And then, still as a rookie into this space, not able to maybe clearly understand the interlinkages of everything. What I could understand is that this is climate change. This is something that's, a result of what climate change looks like. It's something that you could see for real, and this could happen again. So we need to be prepared. We need, to be more resilient. Yes, there was young people that came in. There was so many stakeholders who stood together. We still lost 500 lives or more. So it's still a big tragedy. You don't need such reminders to think about climate change or put together people to work on it. And my first initial steps at that time, this was way before I started the foundation, was working with different stakeholders to run different campaigns. And at that point of time, plastic was one of, like, problem that I was dealing with. I started a campaign called Swap the Straw. It went all across the state. We had 15,000 signatures on a petition, physically signed by around 15,000 people. We submitted it to the chief minister. We did a lot of campaigns. We
Wow.
introduced a lot of alternatives to the market for the first time. We brought in steel straws, bamboo straws, paper straws, made it available to different shops, and talked to different people on both sides. There's the consumers, there's also the people from the shops or different, who also have issues. Maybe plastic straw is the cheapest option. How do you make them understand? How do you convince them? So it was like a 3 months sort of a process, and it was very successful. What outcome came out of it? And I had a lot of young people behind me. It was not just me alone. There was a lot of young people supporting this initiative. There was a lot of stakeholders who supported this initiative. And I realized there's potential, for, if young people come together for something, that as an 18-year-old, if you want to start working on something, there's people who will be there. There's at least young people who will support you, and you can do something. So that really pushed me to think in the direction that, okay, young people have the potential, have power. Stakeholders are also willing to work with you if you talk to them in a certain way, if you understand their language, and if you understand, what really is the support they need as well. This is one of the biggest learnings I have had throughout my journeys. When you look at governments, or when you look at different stakeholders, or everybody, they're not alien to not having support. They're also institutions that need hand holding, that need some sort of support in every way. They're not perfect. They're also looking for support, but it's the right way that you approach them that you can get to work with them. So that's some practice that we keep following for the foundation as well. And eventually, a few months down the line, I was like, okay, why don't we institutionalize this? There's a lot of young people who want to work with us. There's a lot of young people driving change. There's a lot of more potential to find more young people, a lot of potential to work with different young people as well. Now, where do you institutionalize this? Where do you make a system around this to make more impact, make something more official? So that's when the idea for the foundation itself, sort of came. Okay, let's have a foundation as a base for working on all this. So it started in 2019 as that, and then now we're in 2026. So that's maybe a brief introduction to how we start.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a journey because, of course, when you're 18, you get inspired by so many moments and experiences. But of course, and you were moved by what happened in your hometown. But you didn't just stop there, right? You pursued that, you tried to think about it, come up with a solution. And today we are looking at a full-fledged foundation, which I believe was founded somewhere around 2019, and today we are in 2026. So even the foundation, I'm sure, has had a journey. And with the foundation, I'm sure you have also grown as a person, as a climate policy activist. So how is the Akhilesh of 2019, or that 18-year-old Akhilesh who saw the Kerala floods, different from the Akhilesh of today who is leading this organization? And how has his viewpoint about climate policy evolved?
I would definitely call myself maybe an advocate in this space, especially climate advocate. And that's also been a journey of its own. Working with the foundation is it's always every day of learnings that you do together. There's the foundation that evolves as an entity of itself, but when you have to lead something like this, you also have to learn and adapt and evolve with what's happening around you. So I think one of the biggest evolutions for that, for example, is the way how we operate, the way how we think about different things, especially climate change itself. Now, in 2019, as maybe a 18, 19-year-old who was starting this foundation, ideas that you had were very premature. You're only just getting to understand this issue. You're again locally working with people. You're locally on the ground, but still that means you're also trying to navigate and understand what is the root cause of this issue. You just think, okay, climate change is just plastics, or climate change is just melting ice, polar caps, or whatever. That's way different from what climate change really looks like on the ground, or what climate change really means. So, but there was a foundation. As a foundation, we had something very basic to begin with. We were like, okay, throughout our journey, it's going to be climate change and young people. These are two important components that we're going to work with. It might be in different shapes and forms that we will engage on these topics, or how we work with these topics. But the fundamental idea of what we're going to work with is climate change, young people. These are two priority areas, the intersection that we want to work with. Now, at the beginning, we would be like, okay, plastics is an issue. How do you maybe think of, okay, let's end plastic could be an idea. Even though we were not extremely saying let's end plastic at the forefront, because even before the foundation, like I said, my idea of working with straws, just one product itself, was not to say let's ban straws immediately, but try to understand what's the side of the shopkeepers, or what's the side of the people who are producing it, manufacturing it. What's their story? How do they transition out of this without being impacted themselves? It's not their fault that they are in this industry. It's also something that's made by the system. And in that direction, you also learn, okay, how do you hear both sides? Your only opinion is not to end plastics. You need to learn the politics of plastic. You need to understand the system of plastic. And
Yes.
even then we had this idea, but then we were not fully like, okay, let's plastic is a problem for us. So what I'm coming to is, from there to now, we have had a journey of learning that it's not a single problem. Let's say ending plastic could be our policy agenda then, or saying, okay, this is something that we want to work with, to now understanding there's a whole system behind it. There is a whole different story at different stakeholders that is interacting. So whatever you propose, whatever you work with, needs to listen to everybody. And that is something that we have evolved to understand as well. And I think it's very natural for any young person or organization or whatever that starts working in this space, this evolution of awareness of what exactly is the cause of the problem. So you're only not saying, when I might be starting off saying, okay, our work is going to be prioritizing on ending plastic, to now saying, how do you limit plastic while making sure there is a just transition for everybody involved, while also not making sure that the ending plastic doesn't take away the necessity of where plastic is really needed. For example, when I was working with straws, I can't just simply say completely end plastic straws because it was essential in healthcare industry, or it was essential in certain areas where you cannot remove it. So the even the terminologies that we use, from ending plastic to now, is limiting plastic or limiting something. So there's a whole journey in how we are looking at issues, how we are working with issues, and how those conversations that we have or dialogues we build shape um, our impact or our results with also other stakeholders that we engage with. Now that is probably, I don't know, was it simplified or not, but that is just an idea of how that evolution looks like, where we changed ourselves to not look at something from a very narrow lens, not from a very base layer, but trying to go as deep as possible. And I think that's something everybody should try to pursue in whatever issue you work in the social space as well. There's the issue at front might be just, very limited in scope when you look at it, but there's a huge network behind of intersections with so many different things that you will have to look into or deal with. And I think understanding those is the evolution of us, and we are still learning as well. We are still evolving, looking at what more can we do, what more is the right and just way to deal with this issue. So that is, yeah, I would probably say a difference from 2019 to 2026.
Yeah, I think you used a beautiful phrase, which is evolution of awareness, right? And I think that just shows how important it is to be open to learn, grow, and evolve through this journey, especially when it comes to a topic like climate change, because, every day there's something new happening, some new data comes. So, when it comes to data, we always read about these various studies being published, various research being done by think tanks. So, was there a moment where, you had one belief or a notion about climate change, but then you came across data which told you otherwise? And then how did you adopt to a situation like this? Not necessarily data, but maybe research which suggested otherwise.
I think this is something that's very crucial for how the space is as well. It's very evolving. One day something is sustainable, the next day it's not sustainable. So it's very tricky to navigate this space as well. For example, when I was working with straws in my early days, my idea was to bring in, okay, if I bring in paper straws or if I bring in steel straws, that's the best of it. You end plastic straws there, and that's the solution. You're very sustainable. But then when you read about it, or if you switch from plastic bags to cloth bags, you're thinking, okay, you have made a sustainable choice. You are contributing to saving the planet. But then when you research more, you understand, and now I don't know if that is also debunked and there is new research that has come. The last I remember of reading something is, if you need steel straw to match the sustainability of even crossing a plastic in terms of something, a plastic straw or its counterpart, is that if you use it at least 127 times or something. So and I think similarly with cloth bag, paper straws, everything there, it is to the degree of how much you reuse to even match how unsustainable is plastic straws. So that makes you, without knowing this, promoting something that is actually unsustainable, and also the end consumer thinking, I'm doing something sustainable but not really sustainable. So it's very tricky to be in this space while you have to navigate and very definitely have to be updated regularly and try to understand, your solution, what you advocate for, is not exactly causing harm, but it's actually, doing something that's good. So it's really, I think these are sort of the research or data that has made me feel differently, or try to make sure whatever we work with is also evolving in a direction that we can also come out and say, okay, this is something that's wrong, but this is what earlier study said. Now the studies say something different. And also it's how you verify and work with institutions to understand whatever you quote or whatever research you look at is also not something that's pushed by an industry or pushed by someone who has some other interest. It's very difficult to navigate all these. Maybe you should really look at trusted sources of data or research to understand how you navigate climate change. For example, IPCC. is one of the benchmark in that direction, or their reports. But it's a very tricky, evolving space where you constantly have to be updated, constantly have to make sure the solutions that you push for, or make sure what you talk about makes sense and is right, and you're not maybe pushing for false solutions.
Yeah, I think that's very important because, like you mentioned, you work in climate policy. So while it's important to, of course, like you mentioned, know about the latest research, the latest trends, the data that is published by various think tanks, I'm sure it's also important to understand the policy that is being implemented by various countries at a national and international level. And you work a lot when it comes to climate policy. So, my next question is with respect to climate policy, that when you're advocating for a particular policy or trying to study a particular policy, are there any systemic barriers that you have encountered? Or what is it when it comes to implementing an effective climate policy that is, stopping us from achieving that goal of a good climate policy? Any systemic barriers or any other problems that you have encountered during your journey?
It's a very broad question. It's something that we can talk about for so much, but I will try to keep it short. Keep
Can be a
from my
separate
understanding.
podcast, maybe.
Yeah, it's something that you could. It's you can talk about in 3 podcasts as well. But from my understanding of what we work in climate advocacy is, especially, we can look at it in 3 different levels. One is trying to understand policy from a local lens, and then there is, you have your state national lens, and then there is the international policy. Now, having these different levels is important, but also occurs on its own. So it's very important to navigate it properly to have good results. Who is your target audience for when you want to work on policy? Is it something that you want to reach local audience? Then you have to not work with international policy. You can't go and push at an international level for something that you want to achieve. So there is 2 different approaches. There's something that's top down, there's something that's bottom up. We as Bring Back Green Foundation work in both directions, but our focus has always been bottom up, and our focus has always been trying to work with local institutions, work with local governments, or try to understand how to make best use of what's available, resources as well as knowledge and everything, and translate into local policy that actually gets replicated everywhere. You have an approach that's top down, it's not going to take in local realities. Your what is maybe from your state to my state, our climate needs are very different. From the panchayat that I stay in right now to the panchayat that's next to me, or the municipality, has different needs, has different climate issues, have different climate vulnerabilities. How do you push down a policy that is at an international level, that is very vague, watered down, and something that is done to get everybody to agree on, push down to such local levels? It doesn't necessarily make sense, but just is for everybody to have consensus on. And so it's important to look at who do you want to engage, who do you want to work with. If your results is focused on a local level, you work with local stakeholders, you work with local governments, and you create structures or policies or recommendations, or do anything that is replicable from these local levels. So we run a project called the Panchayat Climate Parliament, and we work with local institutions like the Kerala Institute of Local Administration, work with around 25 local governments in Kerala, one representing at least each of the districts in Kerala. And what we do here is work with young people from these panchayats to train them, build capacity for them to work better with their own local governments. I can sit in Delhi or Mumbai or somewhere and say, okay, let's cut fossil fuels, or let's cut emissions, whatever. I can just say that, but maybe try to understand your local context first is something that's very important, and try to work or start from there is probably a good approach. And that's something I also encourage, push, something that we as a foundation also try to do more. And with this particular project, we work with these young people, build capacity for them. They work with local governments and co-create policies. And the benefit of that is the local governments or stakeholders are well versed, maybe with their community members, knows these young people. But also it's that, they can understand the issues. So the young people there knows, okay, my house gets flooded, or 3 houses from here gets flooded, or there's a potential for landslide, or the soil is weak, or whatever they know the waste management is wrong, and then they can have a conversation, have work with their local representatives to co-create solutions. They come together, sit once in 2 weeks, and we have created such a space and something that channels really bottom up and with the support of the local governments. That is one side, but that doesn't mean you really don't need to work on national or international level. That is definitely an approach. It comes bottom up, you replicate it. So like I said, around 25 panchayats now replicate it. We have a project now called the National Youth Climate Consortium. We are replicating some ideas of this project now in 33 states and union territories across the country. Now, we are doing all that bottom up thing, but at the same time, we also need to prioritize what discussions happen at the international level, because you don't want something that's against what you're working for. You don't want something that doesn't include you or young people or other stakeholders who you work with, doesn't mention gender, or doesn't talk about really the problems that you see on the ground. So you also need to be at that space. You also need to be in the international space. Like for the past 3-4 COPs I have been there, and also representatives from these the NYCC project or my team, we all have been also prioritizing to get stories from there, report to young people and people on the ground, but also try to see how do you make sure your voice is heard there. This is the place where all the international policies get made. Now, if at these places there is no young representatives who actually face climate change, what's the point? Who do they refer to understand what's the impact of the policy that they're going to make? Now, so you should be at the local level, you should be at the international level, you should also be at the national level. There is different areas that you need to target based on the result that you need. But for climate change, you need to be at all these places at the same time. You need to work on all these places. You need to work to make better bottom-up systems. You need to work on making better policies, replicable, scalable solutions which work from a local level to a local level and upwards. But you also need to be at the international space. You also need to be at the national space. And at all these three different levels, it might be stakeholders who are vastly different. Maybe the government that you work at a local panchayat is very different from the state government, is very different from the central government. But you need to also work with everybody. You also need to understand everybody's priorities. You need to also see how you can work with them and champion more solutions or build more solutions, work for better advocacy. So all these things are very important. All these things are scattered, have their own priorities, have their own way of functioning, are all independent, different systems that have their own unique way of solving climate change. But it's very important that you work on all of them. And that's something that we have been doing as BBG for a long time. We are actively there in different UN processes. We are working closely or more, have been accredited to UNEP, different conventions, UNFCCC, all these spaces, but also make sure our projects reflect grassroots reality, work with local governments. What are their needs? What gaps is there? So, and at a national level. So that's some sort of an
Yeah.
understanding of where this policy comes.
Yes, yes. It's very interesting. And like you said, it's a vast, topic to be discussed. But I really like how you talked about local realities and engaging the youth at a local level. And a significant part of your work also involves storytelling. So you're involved in documentation, producing podcasts. So, what was the inspiration behind it, and what sort of stories are you documenting through your work? We would like to know more about them.
I think we started documentation as a priority since 2020 itself, but we have different ways of have tried to approach it. We have, like you said, podcasts we don't do anymore, but then we used to do podcasts during COVID times to reach more people online. We have done full-fledged films, 30 to 40 minutes films, which some of them are available on YouTube. There are mini documentaries that is available on YouTube. There are several films that we are yet to release, which we are working on, and which have but there are some films we have only streamed in international film festivals or different film festivals across the world, or have screened at different international conferences. All this is to make sure that, again, the local realities get captured. And while I, as an individual, or many other young people, could go around speaking about these realities, speaking about what's happening, stories have a better way of reaching people, have a better way of making people understand what's happening. And this is one reason why we started storytelling itself. And since then, we have around small films, medium-sized films, all these that we have done, many that are available on YouTube. We capture young people's stories. We capture stories of communities and their lived realities. We also do fictional films to make sure that, okay, maybe documentaries reach 10,000, 20,000 people, but fictional films, if done well, maybe could reach, a much more wider audience and reach around. One of our film on YouTube has around 500,000 views, and there are several films that we are yet to release in that direction.